You're listening to the When Life Hands You Lemons podcast.
But in an entry-level film production, it's one strike and you're out. You're fired. I'm not calling you back.
If your goal today is to make a basket, we're going to make that basket.
The minute you create something, as soon as it's made tangible, you have a copyright in it.
How do I get our guys to sound that big, that full when they do the harmonies?
And I'm your host, Lennon Seahawk. Let's get to the show. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of When Life Hands You Lemons. This is an episode I'm very excited to share with you because it's about sync licensing. And sync licensing has been a feat and a project and an arm of the music industry that I have been very fascinated by for the last 5-6 years now, and more specifically recently because I've been very heavily involved with it and learning so much about it. Now, Miss Shellie Lewis is this week's guest, and she is the business development manager at a company called SyncFloor. And I will let her tell you exactly what SyncFloor is and what they do. But in this episode, we talk about flexibility in the face of change. And flexibility in the face of change is so important because we're currently in the midst of a global pandemic, and all of us are kind of figuring out what to do and how to fit into our new normal. And when we come out of this pandemic, things are definitely going to be different. And it's important to maintain flexibility when those things start to return to normal because we're going to have to start adapting to new ways of life. We also talk about the importance of maintaining organization, especially in the sync realm. We talk about the importance of having all of your songs into a spreadsheet or however you organize on your ISRC codes, your ISRW codes, your links to your tracks, your disco links, all of your metadata inputted and ready to go when that opportunity comes about. And we talk about all kinds of other things, and Shellie is such a wealth of information, especially in the sync realm, and I will let her tell all of that good information, and I don't want to give too much away, but before we do, I want to remind you to please sign up to my mailing list as it helps me notify you when new episodes like this are live. That link will be in the show notes. I would also encourage you to leave me a 5-star rating and or review. I mean, we've made it to episode, I think this is 52 now. I would really appreciate a 5-star rating and a review. 52 episodes in, it makes a world of a difference to me. There is a guest request form below as well, so if you or somebody you know would be a good guest for the show, please fill it out, and I will reach out if you're a good guest for the show. Lastly, I want to plug my Instagram. I'm going to be posting upcoming episodes and previews and snippets and keeping up with my daily life as well and everything in the music business. Please follow that. That will be in the show notes as well. So without further ado and me rambling on too much longer, please enjoy my conversation with Miss Shellie Lewis. So why don't you tell us about who you are and what you do?
Okay, I'm Shellie Lewis. I am the business development manager at SyncFloor. And SyncFloor is like a management marketplace for users to license music for use in advertising, film, TV, video games, podcasts, and developing media. And it's my job basically to forge new relationships with buyers such as music supervisors and production companies that would be looking for music, and also sellers like distribution companies, small labels, and publishing companies.
When you're talking about sync licensing and kind of building these relationships, can you talk a little bit about what sync licensing is for those who may not quite understand what it is?
Okay, yes. So sync licensing is you need to get a license whenever you sync up music with any other kind of composition. So that could be a podcast, now is very popular, but more traditionally you would think anytime a song is linked up or, you know, um, included in a commercial or a TV episode, even if it's deep in the background, there still has to be a license to be able to use that, which is granted by whoever owns the rights to the music. Sometimes you would think that would be the artist, but not always the case. Sometimes publishing companies hold those rights, and artists would maybe get an advance for future, sync, placements and stuff like that. That's basically how it works. You have music in anything, you have to have a license for it. Even something like Peloton.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's something I've been learning a lot about is you have to have that license. Like you can't. It's like if you wanted to use your neighbor's car to run to the grocery store, you can't just take it and use it.
Yeah, you have to ask.
Right, or you can't just take their car and use it for Uber and make a lot of money on it and then not pay them. Like, hey, it's my car. You got to ask me first if I can use it, and we got to work out a deal to pay for gas and all that fun stuff. So it's very similar in the same realm of copyrights and sync licensing. Is you got to ask permission from the copyright holder or holders to use their music in a production.
Yeah, and you think a lot of the times, like YouTube people, how do they get their music in there? Sometimes they're not getting the proper licenses, and it gets really tricky in there especially when they start to become popular. And it has happened where music is used and not licensed. The person blows up, and suddenly people are knocking on their door to collect, and they get sued. So you have to definitely be careful.
And that's one of the reasons why I started this podcast, is because a lot of people don't understand that you can't just use anybody's music.
Yeah.
And that's a huge misconception. And like, oh, if it's under 5 seconds, I can use it. That's not true. You still have to have a license to use the track. And it's gotten a little bit easier. Like YouTube is making it a little easier with their content ID, and then it gives content creators the option or copyright holders to kind of make a decision like, do you want to strike this down? Do you want to leave it in there? Do you want to monetize it? And it's a little bit easier, so creators can just use the music and then just leave it up to the copyright holders to make that decision.
Yeah, it does kind of suck though when if they decide to pull the music and then your video just disappears.
Yes.
That's not really all that great. So
no,
it's always better to just be safe, especially if you think that something is going to be successful. And I mean, a lot of times you don't really, chase creating anything that you don't think is going to be successful. So you might as well just cross your T's and dot your I's.
Exactly. So how would somebody go about getting the proper license to use that, whether it be something through SyncFloor or just in your own experience? Like, how does somebody go about getting the license to use a track?
Well, I can just kind of start with like how I started. Before SyncFloor, I managed 2 different artists, and I've basically had small directors or producers from independent films just reach out to us via email and say, hey, I want to use this in my movie. How much is it going to cost me? And a lot of times, it might even be their first film, and they're trying to figure out what kind of license do I even need? So you'll get questions back sometimes from creators because they don't really know a whole lot about licenses. They just know that they need one. So that's traditionally how it works. You find something you like, and then you have to find the rights holders, whoever they are. Sometimes there's just one, that would be One Stop Music. And sometimes there's multiple rights holders, and that would be multi-stop. A lot of the major label stuff or huge releases, there tends to be multiple rights holders with those. And so then you have to negotiate separately with everybody.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you look at some of the pop songs that are being written and released on the radio. Some of them have 3 producers and 6 or 7 songwriters. So
exactly.
Yeah, and that can get kind of messy, and it's especially with independent artists these days. They don't really understand all that stuff and how the importance of how you can lay out what you own.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about why it's important to know who owns what and the percentages?
Yes, exactly. I mean, it is always a really awkward, conversation to to have at some point when you're starting a project, especially if you think you're going to be making multiple songs with someone. Like, at one point do I ask them what our splits are going to be, or at what point do we discuss that? You're just going to have to kind of, push through that awkwardness and just get straight to it and say, hey, we're working together. We should put together a really short 1-page deal memo, which is bullet points of like what our ownership is and how we're splitting that, whether it's 50-50 or if there's more people that you think you might need to split this with. It's good to know and just kind of have that, even if you just do I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really like give you legal advice, but what I have done in the past is just, at least try to, get everybody on the same page, make it really short. You don't have to try to put a whole bunch of legalese in there. And have, DocuSign that, and then kind of go from there. And at least you have something that you can take to your lawyer later whenever you retain one and say, okay, well, these are the deal memos I have. Let's make it official with better contracts or something. That's how I've approached it in the past. It's hard to give people advice on this part because it kind of straddles the line on like legal, but I found that that's really kind of covered my buns a few times, especially when you kind of get really deep into a project and then people start to get other ideas, or let's say all of a sudden you start to get a little bit of traction and then the producers want more, and then it's like, okay, I've been working on this project for 1.5 years and now people are complaining about their splits and nothing's official. So, I don't know. You can try to keep it as simple as possible, but it's good to like have a discussion with people and know where you stand. Because honestly, if you guys aren't on the same page as far as what your contribution and what the split is going to be for that, like you're never going to be able to agree on things like licensing, So that's my advice.
Yeah, it's kind of a risky, but it's also a good thing. You need to have a conversation around these types of things, because when things start picking up and you guys start making money, and sync licensing can be very, very lucrative. I mean, you can easily pay student loans off in one sync.
Oh yeah,
easily.
I mean, you can easily completely blow up your career and be off to on a whole new track if you get the right sync. So. It's really important to know. The other thing is are you kind of know the situation with your collaborators? Are they signed? Do they have a publishing deal already? Those are kind of things that you need to know, because if they have a publishing deal and everything that they're working on is folded into that publishing deal, how does that work for you?
You'll have to you'll have to negotiate with the publishing company, and it'll have to be negotiated with them based on the contract. Maybe they don't have to negotiate it, but it's completely on their contract, and these are just conversations that you need to have. And not only that, once everything is set and done, let's say you've hashed out all of the information and you've got who owns what, and all that stuff is pushed to the side. You can focus on creating, and when you're done creating and you're pitching your music to sync agents or production houses or music supervisors, it makes it easier for them if you can go to them and present them, here's a track, here's a link, here's who owns it, here's the percentages, here's the contact information for you to clear it. It makes it so basically it's not a one-stop shop, but it makes it so they don't have to go digging, because chances are these people are so busy, they're working on so many projects, they don't have much time to spend on you to search down 6 different songwriters and then 3 different publishing companies. They just don't have the time. So if you're laying it all out, it makes it so easy for them to just reach out, contact, and then get your music sunk.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I would definitely suggest it's also it's not the most fun part of the job, but keep a spreadsheet of all your songs. Unfortunately, a lot of people, when I reach out to them about SyncFloor, and actually the music client that I work with, SyncFloor reached out to me for his catalog, and we had to kind of put all that stuff together for the first time. I had just started working with him about a year ago, so I had to go through all the catalog, contact all the producers, get our deal memos all signed, track down all the waves, track down all the instrumentals. Those things were just everywhere.
Wow.
And I had to, just have a spreadsheet with the links to everything, everybody's contact, what the splits are, 50%, 25, whatever it is. And what pro they're with, whether it's BMI or, what have you. And just make it as easy as possible for someone to just get in and either help you get syncs, or if someone's reaching out to you for a sync, then, they have all the information that they need. Because yes, like sometimes just finding, doing the forensics to find all the rights holders can gobble up a lot of time. And depending on how important it is for them to get your song, if you make it difficult for them, they may just give up.
Mm-hmm. And can you imagine having to go through and you have a catalog of, say, 50 to 100 songs that you've released over the last, say, 5 years, and somebody comes to you and they say, hey, I want to sync these songs, and you've collaborated with 10 different people 4 years ago, and having to chase all of that information down is going to be so overwhelming. And let's say you need that, it could be potentially the biggest sync of your life.
Yeah.
And you need to chase that information down, and they need it in like 3 days max. Yep. That would be an absolute nightmare.
I mean, now's the time that everybody's locked down and at home to do some of this housekeeping.
Yes. And that I've been meaning to do it as well. I keep pushing it off, but I know that it's definitely on my to-do list before I start reaching out to any sync agents and things like that later down the line. So just having all of your ducks in a row to make music supervisors' lives easier is going to make your life easier ultimately. And just keep a running catalog, like you said, a spreadsheet and whatnot of all this information with contact information, who owns what splits, links to the deals that you have, and the all that stuff.
Any
makes
notes
it easier
that you have for anything. And also making sure that you have your songs really truly are clearable. If you need to sit down with a producer and have a conversation and be like, look, did you use any samples that we just cannot own? You need to know those things, because if you're telling a music soup that it's pre-cleared, or you don't have any samples in this and you do, and then that does get placed, like that could be a really bad situation. So know your music.
Yes. It would be, and you would probably never get contacted by that music supervisor ever again.
Yep, that's a really good way to burn yourself.
Yes. And I mean, just for those who don't know, let's kind of a situation recently is Lil Nas X's Old Town Road. Was it? There was a producer, he bought the beat from a producer for like $30, and it had a 9 Inch Nails sample in it.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he didn't know that, so then 9 Inch Nails came after them, and they ultimately worked it out. But that's just a situation, especially when, people are out buying beats for $30. Well, a lot of these people don't have the knowledge and know-how that, I need to get this sample cleared from 9 Inch Nails and all that whole situation. So they just used it thinking like, I've completely affected it and changed all of this stuff. Like they won't even notice it. And it's not even there anymore, but it is. It's originally their sample, and they used it. Lil Nas X and his team didn't realize it. 9 Inch Nails came after them, said, hey, and they got it clear. I don't know exactly what happened, if they got payments for it and they had to remove it or what, but yeah, it was.
I mean, they kind of, I don't know, because I didn't read about this, but most likely they kind of retroactively folded them into the deal. And the problem is, though, if you just let that happen to your own music, you could potentially lose all of your profits. Think blurred lines. Yes. That's the worst case scenario. I'm sure, Trent Reznor seems like a really nice guy, and, I think that they probably were pretty reasonable. But depending on who you're dealing with, they could just come for it all.
Right. And especially like if that song is signed to a major label and you're affecting the master, the chances are the label owns the master. And if it's one of the majors, they're definitely going to have deep pockets and will come for you.
Yeah. Good luck trying to fight that.
Yes, especially for an independent artist with not as much money, and it's just a sticky situation. It's just you've always got to be on the lookout for these types of things. You can't just sign anything. I mean, there are even deals where these people will buy beats, and you'll sign an agreement that'll basically say that you completely own everything, and that the person that made the beat does not take any responsibility for anything. So if there is a sample in that beat that you just bought and you get sued for it, you are taking the rap for it, not the person that made the beat. So these types of deals and things do happen, and it's just another alarming thing that you need to pay attention, especially if you're getting into the sync realm and you're using all these different songs and stuff, and it can be a very hairy situation, and that's why we're here having this conversation, to educate people and show people how important it is to just pay attention and kind of learn the basics.
Yeah.
We're currently in the midst of the global pandemic of COVID-19, and there's so many musicians are starting up online concerts, and they're doing festivals, and they're doing everything they can to make a little extra money. But what about like production? Like, what are the TV shows doing? Is this a good time for sync licensing? Like, can you talk about production and music during this kind of hectic time in our lives?
Yeah, well, on the TV and film side, it's I've been following this quite a bit because I have a lot of friends that are actors and work in the film industry here in LA, and producers and such. And it seems like advertising is going to be the first thing to really get back on track, I think, as far as filming new productions. They're hard at work now rewriting scripts and just kind of waiting for things to open up a little bit. And, they're thinking skeleton crews and just scaling everything down. So as far as advertising is concerned, as soon as we are not on lockdown anymore, I think they're going to start trying to work out how they can get, back to filming. I know that, insurance is probably going to be an issue for a while, just to get, productions insured. So that's also a thing that may slow things up. But just keep in mind, there's not going to be a lot of new episodes of TV coming out pretty soon. There was a lot of stuff that was still in production that was midway through the season. And they're probably, I don't know what they're going to do about that as far as rewriting or figuring out how they're going to, shift storyline. But eventually there's going to be a huge rush of content making again. And when that happens, because they're going to have to fill a void, basically. When that happens, there's definitely going to be, I think, a big surge of sync opportunities that happen. And that could be really in a matter of a month or two, I think. Hopefully, I'm going to cross my fingers, because I really want everybody to be able to get back to work as soon as possible. But I just, now I feel like is a good time to do your housekeeping. Now's a good time to organize your stuff, figure out how you want to present it to people, start reaching out to people that you think that might be able to help you, whether it's a sync rep or reaching out to SyncFloor, or, just trying your own shot at pitching music supervisors. That's how I started. See how far you can get with that. Making sure that you can, right now you might be able to actually get people to listen because they're not as busy. And then once people, get back to work, hopefully you'll be top of mind and you can continue to organize. The more organized that you make your stuff and the easier you make it for people to, search through it and understand who you are, that you have all your business, in order, is gonna, float you to the top of the list of possible, options.
And not only that, when you got everything organized and you're pitching these things to people, and they see that you have all of your ducks in a row, they're going to be like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
When I get a pitch from this person, I know that everything is going to be right there in front of me, and I'm not going to have to go searching for it. It's going to be easily synced.
Exactly.
So that's why, going back to our conversation a couple of minutes ago about having everything kind of lined up and doing your housework, now is a good thing to do. And maybe it might be good to set aside a weekend to just kind of take care of that stuff and, put aside the actual creation of music and then do some of the important business stuff.
Totally. And, I would just like maybe, just add songs as you can kind of consider them done to your spreadsheet. Whether or not you feel like it's going to be a commercial release or not, just so that if you decide to go back and resurface a song that you worked on years ago, that's just in your archives, that you still have all that information ready and not just the material that, you're putting on your album.
And when you have one of these spreadsheets, what is some of the information that you should include in them?
The work title, so that would be the name of the song. ISRC number, which you would get if you had uploaded it on CD Baby or TuneCore. Let's see, the artist name, the BMI or ASCAP work ID, the splits. So I would if there was multiple people that worked on a song, the work title would be duplicated for as many people are on the song. So let's say there's 5. So you would see that work title 5 times, and then you would see under the artist or the name of the contributor or artist name, you would have that change down the line. So it would be like person number 1, person number 2, person number 3, person number 4, person number 5. And then you have next to that, they're split. So it would be like 10%, 25%, 40%, 10%, whatever. And then I would actually add to this a field that would be like linked to the wave and then linked to the instrumental wave. And I would just have a folder on like Google Drive or something like that links to that asset. So you could literally send this spreadsheet to a sync rep or publishing company or what have you, and they would be able to just see all the splits, all the information that you have, and then also just click on that link and get the asset.
What about is it important to have you need to have your full legal names of the collaborators, correct? You can't have pseudonyms or anything like that.
Yeah, so it would be whatever your member name is for ASCAP or BMI.
Okay. And then what about using SoundCloud link or things like that?
Whatever.
Does that work as well?
Yeah, if you make that downloadable.
Okay, it has to be downloadable?
Yeah, because this isn't something you're really posting on the internet. This spreadsheet, it's for people who are asking for it or for people that need to have it. So if they're going this far, don't make them go through an extra step to be able to download, I would say. Just make it available. SoundCloud is great, but you would also have to click another link to download versus putting it on a Google Drive. And when you click on that link, you're downloading it.
That makes sense. So just like I said, it just comes back to full circle of making it easier for whoever's using it to access it and download it and then use it.
Yeah, exactly.
So are you a musician yourself, or how did you kind of get into this realm?
I've always just been, I guess, a big fan of music. I started working at a indie or a community-run venue. It was all ages. That was in Orange County when I was growing up. I started working there when I was 13, and I really liked it because I could just go to as many shows as I wanted, and I was basically also working it, I guess, and could go backstage and do all the stuff. So I had a great time, but it just so happened that venue was a place where No Doubt kind of started out, and Eric Stefani was really involved in the programs that we were doing. And when he was working on an animated indie film called Chicks and Hicks, I believe, he had a bunch of us painting cells. And after that whole, experience, when I went off to get a job when I turned 18, I applied at Sony Music because I always kind of knew I wanted to work at a record label or something like that. And I applied to work in their creative services department. And Eric Stefani wrote me a beautiful letter and helped me get that job. And I was kind of off to the races from there. So I've worked in and out of the music industry since I was a teenager. But, as things have changed over the years, especially when I first started, that's when Napster was happening, and a lot of things were kind of flipping on its head in the major label scene, and I lost my job. So I ended up moving into a movie advertising for a very long time, and then eventually just straight up brand advertising. So I worked on some pretty cool stuff with like Nike and Allstate, and did that for a long time. And then I slowly got pulled back into the music scene because my friends were like, hey, help me. You've done this before. So I got sucked back in. And now with my role at SyncFloor, it's the first time where my music experience and my digital and advertising, or more digital experience, have kind of coalesced, so to speak. So I'm able to work in music now, but at a technology company. That's really exciting for me. So that's kind of how I got to where I am.
Interesting. So you take music and technology and you kind of blend them together, which is an interesting meetup.
So for SyncFloor, just kind of give you a little bit more of an understanding of what it actually is. It is a technology answer to some of the pain points of sync licensing on the sell side. So, from an artist point of view, there's a bunch of problems that I've experienced, and that would be, one, even if you have people representing your music, it's very hard to know if they're actually pitching your music. They would have also a catalog and multiple artists or labels that they're representing. And so how do you know if you're actually top of mind when they have something come across their desk? Are you really being put out there? It's hard to know. So that was one thing I was experiencing that was kind of bothering me. The other part was there was no real transparency and negotiation or what was going on. So I recently had a situation where something was placed and we had no idea who placed it, how much we were getting paid, when we were getting paid. It already had aired. It was kind of confusing. So it would be good to know, have more of a view into those kind of things. And also, even if you are being pitched by whoever is representing your music, it's also kind of hard to know if you're the right fit for what the music supervisor is asking for, or if your music even surfaces at all, if they're searching through their database or however they organize their music and they're searching for stuff, maybe you're in the wrong category or the wrong folder, and then you just don't pop up at all. So SyncFloor answers a lot of those questions or a lot of those problems. And also just the transactional part of it, once you're in our system, everything should be pre-cleared. It's one stop, so there's only going to be one person representing the music, at least on our platform, and that's something that you guys can kind of make sure that you work out ahead of time. So when a music supervisor does find your music, they can just get that license quickly. So we're cutting things that maybe could take weeks upon weeks or even months sometimes to settle into, hopefully days.
That's interesting. And, as I learn more about the sync world, it's such a confusing industry, especially if you're going into it so quickly. And sometimes you can get sucked into it really quickly because somebody contacts you and they're like, hey, I want to use your song in this upcoming movie. Can you send me the track? And there's so much more to it than just sending the track over, as we've just talked about. There's so much more to it that goes into this sync licensing and using that song. And it can be very confusing, and you just discussed some of the issues in it, and those types of things can come up during that process. So you talked about like if your music is good and sometimes it's categorized wrong, like what music does really well in sync, and can you give some examples of like genres of music that do well in, say, trailers or advertising? And then can you talk about some of the tools that you use? Like I've heard of music supervisors really liking disco, like
Disco.
the Euphoria and Atlanta music supervisor Jen Malone says that she likes using disco and loves disco.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like even if you're having your music ingested into SyncFloor, we take disco links as well. So if you have your stuff uploaded to disco, you can use those links, and music supervisors are used to using them, and they're familiar with the site. So that's a very good option for sure. As far as music that I think would be successful, I couldn't really speak for that. I'm more on a specific artist side of things, or from a SyncFloor perspective, like we love lots of range and variety. So, I guess there could be popular genres, but sometimes it's also great to just be yourself and not necessarily write for a specific purpose, and make good music. And if it's good, there'll be the sync out there for that. And then the challenge is just to be able to make sure that it can be found when someone's looking for it.
And how can people make it found? Like is like the metadata, like can you talk about the importance of metadata?
Making sure that you're filling out all your metadata is important. I find that there can be problems with trying to self-tag stuff, because it's not always consistent across the board. So some people might say something is blues or something, just for an example, and it may not. So, if somebody's searching for that, you could actually have a bunch of stuff that's not relevant at all popping into the search as well. And it's also, I've heard some artists say that they mistag on purpose so that their stuff sticks out in some instances. Like I had a friend of mine tell me that he was doing that on SoundCloud, and I was like, why would you? That doesn't really make sense to me, but I guess some people do that as well. But I mean, for me, I think the answer is really SyncFloor, because we do get a lot of information from a song from what is out there on the internet as far as metadata, lyrics, and all that kind of stuff. And then we also have another layer of like music analysts that listen to every single song and tag things in a consistent way in our platform, so that when people search, what surfaces is like very consistent. So I mean, that to me is the solution. I know some people kind of try to do it just manually. It's hard. I mean, that's one of the major pain points, is making sure that your music is tagged properly and that can surface somehow in a search on whatever platforms that you're using.
You mentioned something called flexibility in the face of change, and I really like that. That really kind of stuck with me, and I might even have that be the title of the episode. Can you talk about like what you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I kind of felt like this almost seems like an echo of when I started working in the music industry. This whole thing that's happening right now with COVID, like Napster really just completely flipped everything upside down, and nobody knew what to do. And it was before iTunes, so they were literally pulling all the young people into meetings at labels and saying, how do you feel about selling music online? Like, what do you guys think? And we're like, well, we've been downloading music at work all day. for a long time for free. So I don't know. It's going to be really hard for you to start charging for this. But, when you have something like that, that kind of just changes the tide of how people are working and functioning in their relationship to the product that you're making. You just have to be open to change, and the people who are open. And it just so happened when it came to, the digital side of music anyway, young people were just like, okay, well, this is what we're doing now. So now we're going to start selling MP3s on our website, now we're going to start, creating playlists digitally for people to listen to our music. That's, you just kind of have to feel out what is new and ride that wave. So, now I think that there's going to be a lot of people who are going to start working from home and stay working from home. They're not going to start just like going back to the offices like that. So to be able to make your music make it easy for people to find your contact, go through all the places where you might even have your contact information. Make sure that email address is still working, so people don't try reaching out to you and then get a bounce back and then they never get a hold of you again. If you had an old manager or an old assistant or whatever that has their contact all over your things that have been uploaded for you, update that stuff so that people can find you again. If you want to add a sync, kind of section to your website that has just simple information. If you're interested in syncing my music for a movie or TV or commercial, please contact me here. I have a spreadsheet available with, all the information about my songs, the splits, and whatever. That would be really helpful because some people, they really have to search to find you and find out how to get what they need. And I mean, I've gone as far as I started to kind of build a searchable page for one of my artists that would have all of the catalog, and you would be able to search by song type, or if there's guitar or no guitar or something like that. And it just so happened that I was literally in the middle of doing that when SyncFloor approached me about his music, and they had gone way farther than I had gotten. They had been building this platform for years at that point, and I was like, okay, well, this is basically the solution I was looking for. When someone's looking for our music, I want them to be able to search our catalog in great detail and surface the right songs quickly, because there's a lot of songs. And it's fine when you have 2 albums, but once you have hundreds of songs, it gets really daunting to be able to search and find what you need.
That's really good information, and it keeps coming back full circle, is keeping everything organized and easily searchable. Mm-hmm. And I like that you put your own kind of page on that website where it makes it kind of how to contact you and making it easily to contact and things like that.
Yeah, and if you ever do get a sync, somebody uses your stuff on a little short film or something like that, put together a reel, of pieces of music that have been used and make that available for people that are searching to sync your stuff. I know one of the artists that I work with, I think it was a Cadillac commercial that synced one of his songs, and you really would never think that Cadillac would pick that particular song, but they did. And so I use that a lot to show hey, we actually do have a range in our sound here, and it can work for a whole lot of different things. So kind of, a little bit of inspiration. And when you're reaching out to someone who, might be able to help you find syncs, go the extra mile whenever you can. I've done things where I have some friends that work in the advertising field, not to be able to post this on the internet because we don't have the syncs for this stuff, but I have grabbed commercials that they've worked on and then put my music behind it and say, hey, look, this is what it would look like if you used our music. And, just little private links and stuff that I would send to my friends and say, check it out. This is some inspiration to see how you could use our music in a car commercial or a Target commercial or, whatever. I tend to go a little above and beyond to get people's attention. But I think it's important sometimes to do that to stand out. So, I mean, that would also be my advice as well. When I got my job at Sony, I did have that lovely letter, but no one was really reading a letter before they looked at my portfolio. So when I approached Sony, I came to them with a portfolio full of Sony artist material. I took current artists on their roster and I recreated my entire portfolio to match what they were doing. And I'd be like, this is my take on a Mariah Carey album. And that's really how I got the job. And it was great that I had a cosign, but I did something that nobody else that was going for that job was willing to do.
Can you imagine if somebody had their spreadsheets lined up, all of their information, a nice website, a solid portfolio, and they're going ahead and they're taking, like, let's say they want to get a sync at Cadillac, for example, and they're taking Cadillac commercials and they're putting their own music and then pitching it. Can you imagine how much you would stand out versus somebody who's just saying, hey, here's my latest track. I think it would work for your next car commercial. Let me know if you want to use it.
Yeah, and you know what? Honestly, it's like if you're going to just do this on your own, you would be surprised how much information is out there about the people you want to get your music in front of. Like, you go on LinkedIn, you can find any creative director or, head of music or in-house music supervisor pretty much at any advertising agency in the country. So, if you're like, I really want to be the music behind the next M&M commercial, or I really want to be the next music behind the next, Toyota commercial. All right, well, you can actually find out who Toyota's advertising agency is. Okay, that's one step. Now you need to find out at that agency who's the music supervisor. Okay, great. Now, these people are busy people, though, so if you're going to reach out to them, make sure your stuff is organized and you're really coming at them with a great presentation. And, just make sure that they can kind of scan through it quickly. Here's an email. I have if you have a reel, throw a reel in there or something like that. A link to your spreadsheet with all of your music attached to that. You can have some bullet points. I've made this easy for you to search, and here's the kind of music that's in here. This kind, this kind, this kind, and this kind. Everything is pre-cleared. There's no samples. Let me know what you think. Easy, That's how I would approach it. And you can also do things like creating playlists even. Like you could create your Toyota playlist and pull a bunch of songs into it. You can use something like SoundCloud if you wanted to, and send that over to them and say, hey, I've made some selects that I think you might be interested in. If this piques your interest, here's access to everything else.
And are these songs that you're pitching, is it okay to pitch them songs that are already released, or do they usually look for songs that aren't released?
Well, in the case of SyncFloor, we only do commercially released music, so it would be already released. But advertising agencies, movies, film, they'll use things that are commercially released and not commercially released. So it just really depends. And if you get a sync for something that's not commercially released yet, you can kind of line that up so that when that production is actually released to the public, you can also release your song.
It kind of comes, you can also potentially use it as promotion. Like obviously a big sync for Toyota is going to be more important than your independent release. Especially if you don't have a huge budget behind it to really push it on Spotify and blogs and TV and all that stuff. Maybe you want to let Toyota premiere the track versus, you kind of reaching out and getting it featured in a little Spotify playlist, get creative and work with these things. Don't let them hinder your release strategies.
Totally. Yeah. Don't be afraid to try new things with your release strategies as well. I think that people get very stuck in their ways. And they're just like, okay, we're going to do step A, B, and C, but maybe you need to add like a Z in the middle and then like, do something else. Because that's sometimes what actually gets all the attention. You can pull a Beyonce and release a visual album, but your version of whatever that would be, the next thing, think outside of the box.
And that comes back to, flexibility in the face of change.
Yeah.
The music industry is constantly changing and especially, with the current pandemic, it kind of got flipped on its head. Mm-hmm. So all these musicians who were touring and making their living off touring now have to come up with another solution to earn supplemental income. If they didn't have a day job and maybe if touring was their full-time job, they got to come up with other things, and you have to be ready for those types of changes. And I think that this has been a good and a bad thing. Bad thing being that, people are losing their income and struggling financially and maybe, physically and things like that. But also, it's also a good thing because it kind of forces you to be creative. Like, you're stuck at home. Like, what can I do to be proactive and productive in this time this extra time that I have? And that really kind of challenges people. Like, maybe I can, get my stuff organized, or maybe I can try a different genre, or maybe I can learn a new instrument, and these types of things like really push you to be creative.
Yeah. I can't stress enough though, that being organized part, I've worked with maybe polar opposites of artists, basically. So like one that's like very organized, and it made it very easy for me to just slide right in and get straight to work, and others that I had to literally pull every single thing out of their brain. And it's so hard to actually do anything when your job is turned into just a pure admin role. Like, I can't actually be creative about doing business with you when all I'm doing is organizing your MP3s. Don't waste your help on that. And there's a lot of people who will help you if you don't make them do extra work.
That's a good point. Because, if somebody wants you, like if I'm hiring you to work with me on my music and getting syncs, like that's exciting. Like, I'm excited to pitch and connect with different people. That's exciting. But if I hire you and tell you that, and then you come in and you're like, your Google Drive is a disaster. Where are these files at? How come you don't have it? Like, who owns this? Like, that's like,
the naming convention is all off. Make sure you're even consistent with that. That is going to be something I know a lot of people are going to cringe to hear. Go back and rename everything so that you're consistent across the board. I don't really care what that is. For me, I usually do artist name, song, and if it matters, release year or something like that. So at least when I'm searching through my files, I can find things easily. When something is named 1, 2, 3, blah, I'll never find that.
Right. And don't do unreleased _ master version 3.1 Final 4 dash and then October 15th of 2019. Nobody knows what the hell that is.
Nope. If you have to put the word final in your file name, you're doing it wrong.
You're doing it wrong. Absolutely. It just comes back again. Organization is key to success in this. Yeah. And it's just it's going to make your life so much easier when those opportunities come about, and you can just say, yep, here you go. Let me know if you need anything.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many favors I've been able to pull just by making whoever is doing the favor doer, making their life as easy as possible to do that favor for me. So as little heavy lifting as possible. So if they're like, if I think that they're going to have to put together like a one sheet about the artist or about the project or whatever it is, I'm just going to go ahead and send that to them. I'll send them my version and say, hey, here's what I have as far as, a one sheet on the artist and the album, with a short bio and some other information. Sometimes I'll even add related if you like, and then all the artists that might be related if you like this artist, stuff like that. And I'm like, feel free to reformat or put this in some other format, but at least they have something to start with,
And what about, is it important to have MP3 files? Is it AIF, WAV files? Like what's kind of like the go-to file format?
I don't know, we accept waves. I always keep waves. Not quite sure what the benefit over like AIFF files, because that's an uncompressed version or a less compressed version of audio file, right?
Yeah. Yep. They're both lossy.
Nah. So, I mean, in that case, I guess it would be your preference, but yeah, MP3s wouldn't be the business for this application.
Okay. Interesting. Cool. That was great. A lot of information. We covered so much in it. It just basically comes down to the organization and making your life easier by having everything organized and then being able to pitch it to these music supervisors, sync agents, trailer houses, whatever it may be.
Yeah. Yeah, and you guys check out syncfloor.com, syncfloor.com, and see how easy it is for you to search and surface some pretty awesome music. It's all one stop, and I think it's a great resource, especially if you're a music supervisor, a filmmaker, or any other creative that makes content at all.
Great. Thank you, Shellie. So how can people keep up with you and the work that you're doing, whether it be at SyncFloor or outside of SyncFloor?
I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I'm on LinkedIn, Shellie with an IE and Lewis, Lewis. And I mean, I'm on Instagram, but it's mostly off topic. I mean, sometimes there's music stuff on there, or entertainment stuff on there, but it's mostly off topic. So let's not do that.
Cool. Yeah, I will put your LinkedIn in the show notes so people can reach out if they have any
Awesome.
questions about anything that you mentioned in the show.
Great. Yeah. Awesome. I wish everybody luck, and just stretch your mind and be creative, and just know that this whole situation with COVID will end. Everybody will get back to work, and when they do, there's going to be tons of content in the pipeline. So just be ready for that.
Yes, and it's going to be an exciting time, and this is the time to get prepared for that huge media boom.